We need to begin by discarding your most basic intuition about geometry. You think of space as a container. To you, the universe is a grand, cosmic warehouse. It has height, width, and depth. You imagine that if you could somehow reach into this warehouse and remove all the boxes, the galaxies, the stars, the atoms, the warehouse itself would remain. You believe that space is the volume left over when you take everything else out. This is your first mistake. In your daily life, this mental model serves you well. When you move a chair across a room, you feel like you are moving an object through a static medium. You see the air, perhaps, but once you imagine the air is gone, you think you're left with a transparent, ghostly grid, a stage that does nothing but hold the actors. But physics does not recognize this grid. In the early 20th century, we began to realize that space is not a passive backdrop. It is a physical thing. It has geometry. It can be bent. It can be stretched. It can be squeezed. If space were truly nothing, it would be impossible to distort it. You cannot bend a lack of something. You cannot ripple a void. Think about a piece of fabric. If you pull at the corners, the fabric resists. It has tension. It has a signature. If you place a heavy ball on that fabric, it sags. This is how we've been taught to visualize gravity, but we often miss the most disturbing implication of that metaphor. The fabric is actually there. If you remove the ball, the fabric doesn't disappear. The tension remains. The capacity for curvature remains. When you look at the gap between two stars, you aren't looking at an absence of reality. You are looking at a physical substance that is currently in its most relaxed state. It is a thing that possesses specific, measurable properties. It has a permittivity. It has a permeability. It dictates exactly how fast light can travel through it. If space were truly nothing, why would it have a speed limit? Why would it care how fast a photon moves? It cares because space is a medium. When you move your hand through what you call empty space, you aren't moving through a vacuum. You are pushing through a field of immense, rigid potential. You are moving through a substance so fundamental that you have spent your entire life mistaking it for transparency. You have been taught that the universe is made of stuff distributed across a void. The truth is more unsettling. The stuff is just a modification of the void. The void is the only thing that is truly real. Everything else, every planet, every heartbeat, every ray of light is just a temporary ripple in a medium that refuses to be empty. Empty space isn't the absence of a physical system. Empty space is the physical system, and it is a system that is currently under immense pressure. Chapter 2. The jitter of the absolute. If you want to understand the void, you have to understand the failure of zero. In your mind, zero is a destination. It is the floor. If you cool an object down, its atoms slow down. If you keep cooling it, eventually, you expect them to stop. You imagine a state of absolute stillness, a point where all energy has been drained away and the universe finally becomes quiet. But in our universe, the floor is a trap. There is a rule in quantum mechanics called the uncertainty principle. You may have heard it described as a limitation of our measurements, that we can't know where a particle is and how fast it's going at the same time. But this isn't a problem with our telescopes or our microscopes. It is a fundamental law of the fabric itself. If a particle were to truly stop to reach a state of absolute zero energy, it would have a precise position and a precise velocity zero. The universe does not allow this. To prevent this forbidden precision, the universe forces everything to jitter, even if you remove every atom. The fields that inhabit space are still subject to this rule. A field like the electromagnetic field cannot simply be zero everywhere. If it were perfectly zero and perfectly still, we would know both its value and its rate of change with absolute certainty. The universe rebels against this silence. Instead of a flat, calm surface, the vacuum is a landscape of zero-point energy. Even at the lowest possible energy state, the vacuum is vibrating. It is a frantic, microscopic boiling. Imagine a pendulum. In the world you see, you can hold a pendulum perfectly still at its lowest point. In the quantum world, the pendulum is never still. It is always twitching, kicked by a restless energy that cannot be removed, because that energy is the cost of existing. This is the quantum foam. If you could zoom in past the atoms, past the subatomic debris, down to the very smallest scales of distance, the Planck length, the smooth geometry of spacetime dissolves. It becomes a turbulent, violent froth. You think of the vacuum as a cold, dead place. It is actually a white-hot furnace of activity, constrained only by the laws of probability. There is no such thing as off, There is no such thing as empty. There is only a minimum level of noise that can never be silenced. When you look at a dark patch of the night sky, you aren't looking at nothing. You are looking at a sea of infinite potential, vibrating with the energy of a billion suns, all cancelled out just enough to look like a shadow. You are standing on top of a volcano that never erupts, but never stops rumbling. If the vacuum is a boiling sea of energy, we must ask, what is actually doing the boiling? In a world dictated by classical logic, something either exists or it doesn't. A chair is there, or the space is empty, but the vacuum does not respect your logic. It operates on a system of cosmic embezzlement, because of the uncertainty we discussed. The universe allows energy to be borrowed from the vacuum, provided it is paid back almost instantly. This energy manifests as virtual particles. Pairs of particles and antiparticles, an electron and a positron, pop into existence out of the literal nothingness. They appear. They sense the universe for a fleeting trillionth of a second, and then they collide and vanish back into the void. You might be tempted to call this a mathematical trick. You might want to believe these are just ghost numbers used by physicists to make their equations work. They are not. They are as real as the floor beneath you. We know this because of an experiment involving two metal plates. If you place two uncharged, perfectly smooth metal plates very close together in a vacuum, something impossible happens. They move. They are pushed together by a mysterious, invisible force. This is the Casimir effect. In the vast ocean outside the plates, virtual particles of all possible wavelengths can exist, but in the tiny gap between the plates, only the small ones can fit. There is more activity on the outside than on the inside. This creates a pressure imbalance. The nothing on the outside is heavier than the nothing on the inside. The vacuum is physically shoving the plates together. This should make you feel a sense of profound vertigo. It means that the empty space in your room is currently exerting a physical pressure on your body. It means that the vacuum is teeming with entities that are too short-lived to be seen, yet too powerful to be ignored. We often think of the universe as a collection of things that stay put. But the vacuum reveals that the baseline of reality is a state of constant creation and destruction. The void is not a graveyard of dead space, it is a nursery of transient existence. Everything you consider permanent is actually floating on a restless tide of things that barely exist at all. You are a solid object built upon a foundation of ghosts who are constantly borrowing energy from the bank of the vacuum and disappearing before the debt collector arrives. Now we must pull the rug out from under your last remaining comfort, the idea that you are separate from the vacuum. You think of yourself as a solid entity made of particles, protons, neutrons, electrons that happen to occupy space in your mind. There is a clear distinction between the player and the field. You are the ball, and space is the grass. This distinction is a lie. Modern physics tells us that there are no balls. There are only fields. Imagine an ocean that stretches infinitely in every direction. When the ocean is calm, you see nothing. It looks empty, transparent, and void of life. But if you slap the surface of the water, you create a wave. That wave travels. It has energy. It has a position. If you were a tiny creature living in that water, you might look at that wave and name it a particle. This is exactly what an electron is. There is an electron field that permeates the entire universe. It is everywhere. It is in the center of the sun, and it is in the dark reaches between galaxies. Most of the time, in most places, this field is at its minimum energy level. It is empty. But when the field is excited, when it is slapped by energy, it ripples. That ripple is what you call an electron. Image, visualization of quantum field excitations as localized wave packets. Every particle in your body is not a thing in space. It is a localized vibration of the vacuum. You are not a traveler passing through a medium. You are a complex harmony played upon the medium itself. Think about what this implies for your identity. You think of your atoms as permanent building blocks, but the stuff of the atom, the vibration, is constantly being sustained by the underlying field. If the vacuum were to truly turn off, you wouldn't just be left in the dark. You would cease to exist, because the very ripples that make you would have nothing to vibrate within. This is the inversion of reality. We used to think that particles were the primary reality and the vacuum was the background. We now know that the vacuum is the primary reality and particles are merely the foam on top of the waves. The vacuum isn't just there. It is the very fabric out of which you are woven. You are not breathing the air, you are breathing the vacuum. You are a ghost made of the void, pretending for a few decades to be a solid object. Chapter 5. The weight of nothing have reached the point where the beauty of the vacuum turns into a nightmare for physics. If the vacuum is a physical substance, and if it is boiling with zero-point energy and virtual particles, then it must have a weight. In the logic of general relativity, energy and mass are the same thing. If you have energy, you have gravity. And if the vacuum is everywhere, then its energy should be pulling on the universe. When physicists sat down to calculate just how much energy is contained in a single cubic centimeter of empty space, they expected a small number. Instead, they found a catastrophe. According to the math of quantum field theory, the density of the vacuum is staggering. If you take the energy of every possible ripple in every possible field, the total is nearly infinite. Even if you cut off the calculation at the smallest possible scale of reality, the vacuum is still predicted to be so heavy that a single thimble-sized volume of nothing would contain more energy on all the stars in the observable universe. Image: a visual comparison of a galaxy versus a microscopic cube of space with a massive weight icon on the cube. This is the vacuum catastrophe. It is the most unsuccessful prediction in the history of science. If the vacuum were actually as heavy as our best theories suggest, the universe would not exist. The gravity of nothing would have crushed the cosmos into a point a fraction of a second after the Big Bang, or, depending on the sign of the energy, it would have ripped space apart so fast that atoms could never have formed. Yet, here you are. You are not being crushed. The universe is expanding, but at a rate that is trillions upon trillions of orders of magnitude slower than the vacuum energy suggests it should. Physicists are left with a terrifying gap. Our math says the vacuum is a leaden sea. Our eyes see a weightless void. There is a discrepancy of $10, $120 1 followed by 120 zeros. This is not a rounding error. It is a fundamental breakdown in our understanding of how reality is put together. We are forced to admit that we do not know what the vacuum is. Either there is some invisible mechanism that cancels out the energy of the void with near-perfect precision, or we have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of space itself. We are living in the shadow of a calculation that says we shouldn't exist. We are floating on a bomb that has the power to unmake the stars, yet it remains, for reasons we cannot name, silent. Chapter 6. The architect of mass have spoken of the vacuum as a weight. But now we must speak of it as a source. You believe your weight, the heaviness you feel in your limbs when you wake up, is a result of the stuff you are made of. You think mass is an inherent property of matter. This is your final, and perhaps most stubborn, illusion. If you take a proton, one of the building blocks of your body, and look inside, you find 3 quarks. But if you add up the mass of those 3 quarks, you only get about 1% of the proton's total weight. Whereas the other 99%, it is in the vacuum. Specifically, it is in the violent roiling energy of the glue in the empty space between the quarks. Your mass is not a property of your matter. It is the energy of the vacuum trapped inside your boundaries. You are essentially a localized pocket of vacuum energy that has been tricked into feeling heavy. And even the quarks themselves owe their mass to the void. Throughout all of space, there exists a field called the Higgs field. It is not a particle. It is a pervasive thickness that fills the vacuum. When you move, your constituent parts are dragging through this field like a swimmer moving through molasses. Without this thick vacuum, the electrons in your atoms would have no mass. They would move at the speed of light. They would never stay in orbit around a nucleus. Your atoms would dissolve. You would dissolve. You think of empty space as a lack of resistance, but without the resistance of the vacuum, the universe would have no structure. It would be a chaotic flash of massless radiation, incapable of forming a single molecule. You do not have mass. You experience mass because the vacuum is refusing to let you move freely. You are a debt of energy, paid for by the very nothingness you thought was empty. The void is not just the stage, it is the glue, the weight, and the very reason you are solid enough to touch. Chapter 7. The final silence are left with a reality that is far more haunting than a simple void. We began with the idea of space as a container, a hollow room waiting to be filled. We have ended with the realization that the room is full, so full, in fact, that its true nature is hidden by its own density. If you could truly see the universe for what it is, you would not see things floating in nothing. You would see a single, continuous, vibrating ocean of fields where the distinction between a star and the dark space around it is nothing more than a change in frequency. There is something deeply humbling about the fact that we cannot even define zero. Every time we try to find a point of absolute stillness, the universe screams back with the noise of existence. The vacuum is not a lack of life. It is a state of rest for a system that can never truly sleep. When you look into the night sky, you are looking at the surface of an infinite, energetic deep. The stars are just the whitecaps on the waves. The darkness isn't a wall. It's a window into the fundamental engine of reality. We are temporary. We are fragile. We are the brief, unlikely ripples that occur when the vacuum is disturbed just enough to notice itself. And eventually, like every wave that has ever broken on a shore, we will subside. We will lose our energy, our frequency will drop, and we will return to the baseline. We won't be gone. We will simply be part of the silence again. The disturbing truth is not that empty space is full of stuff, it's that the stuff was never really there to begin with. There is only the vacuum, dreaming of being us for a moment, before it remembers how to be still.